I visited my daughter Rachel's house on a quiet Friday afternoon, a visit we had planned 2 weeks in advance. But the moment I stepped through the door, it was clear no one had truly been looking forward to it. The house was beautiful, newly built in a calm suburban neighborhood, a home I had poured a significant amount of my retirement savings into, helping them avoid a mortgage. I told myself it was a gift, the kind a mother gives her only daughter when she's building a new life with her husband. I thought it meant something. Rachel greeted me with a half smile, a hug that barely brushed my shoulders, and eyes that looked past me more than at me. "You're here." "Mike's in the garage, working on storage stuff," she said, her voice clipped, her phone still in her hand. I smiled and nodded, pretending not to notice the coldness. Maybe she was tired, stressed. I told myself not to overthink it. I stepped into the living room, taking it all in. It was lovely. Modern furniture, elegant lighting, clean neutral tones. But there wasn't a trace of me in it. Not a single photo from our past. Not the family portrait I gifted them last Christmas. Not the quilt I handmade and mailed them last spring. It was like I had never been a part of this place. Like I was never meant to be. "Want some tea, Mom?" Rachel asked, already halfway to the kitchen, not even waiting for an answer. Once upon a time, she would have asked if I wanted chamomile or peppermint. Now, she didn't bother. I sat on the edge of the couch and listened to the muffled sound of children laughing upstairs, my grandkids. I hadn't seen them since last Christmas either. Mike appeared briefly from the hallway, wiping paint from his hands. "Oh, hey," he said with a quick nod, then disappeared again. No small talk. No, "how've you been?" Just a passing acknowledgement, like I was a neighbor who showed up uninvited. Something felt off. The air was too thin, the house too quiet despite the occasional noises from the kids' room. A familiar ache crept into my chest. I had felt it before, years ago when my husband died, but this was a different kind of emptiness. This was the ache of being unwanted. After dinner, I went to retrieve my coat for a short walk outside, an excuse to breathe, but paused as I passed Rachel's room. The door was mostly closed, but not enough to block out sound. Mike's voice was low but clear. "We can't let her stay too long, Rachel. She's already rearranged the pantry." "I know," Rachel sighed, "but we can't just tell her to leave. Just keep her uncomfortable. She'll go sooner or later. It's not like she has anywhere else to be. The money's already been spent anyway." I didn't move. I couldn't. The words hit me harder than I thought words ever could. My knees weakened, and I steadied myself against the wall, pressing one hand over my chest. Money. That's what I had become to them. I crept back to the guest room, the room Rachel had once called "your space anytime, Mom." It was bare. No throw pillows, no welcoming scent, not even a lamp on the nightstand. It felt less like a room for a loved one, and more like a temporary holding cell. And there, sitting alone on the unfamiliar bed, I let the truth settle around me. I wasn't part of their family anymore. I was a burden they were trying to shed politely, without confrontation. And in that moment, I felt something in me shift. Something that had been soft for far too long. Something that finally woke up. They didn't think I would notice. They didn't think I would do anything. But they were wrong. The next morning, I made breakfast. Out of habit, mostly. Scrambled eggs, toast, and sliced fruit. Simple, comforting. I arranged everything neatly on the table before realizing no one was coming down. No footsteps from upstairs. No kids shouting "Grandma" like they used to. Just silence. I waited for a few more minutes before calling softly, "Breakfast is ready." No response. When Rachel finally emerged, dressed but distracted, phone in hand, she barely glanced at the table. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You didn't have to do that." I smiled politely. "It's no trouble." "We already ate," she added quickly. "Mike made smoothies." I looked down at the plates, the still warm eggs. "Oh," I said softly. "I didn't know." Rachel didn't say anything. She grabbed her keys from the counter. "I have an appointment. You'll be okay here?" I nodded. Of course I would be okay. I had been alone for years. I knew how to be okay. She lingered a moment. "By the way, you're not staying too long, right?" I looked up, startled. "I mean, it's just the kids have their routines, and Mike's been working late. It's a bit hectic," she explained, her voice light but her eyes firm. "You understand." There it was. No room for pretending anymore. She wasn't asking. She was telling me. I managed a nod. "Of course, I'll head back Sunday." Rachel looked relieved. Perfect, I'll see you later then. She was out the door before I could say goodbye. I sat back down at the table. The food had gone cold. Later that afternoon, I heard the kids playing in the backyard. I stepped outside to say hello. At first, they looked excited, bright faces running toward me, but as they reached the porch, they slowed. "We're not allowed to go out front without Mommy," Ellie said, glancing nervously toward the sliding glass door. I bent down and smiled. "That's okay. I just wanted to say hi." "Grandma," Ben said, his voice barely above a whisper, "Mommy said you don't live here." My heart stilled. "No," I said gently, "I don't." Ben tilted his head. "But you paid for the house. Mommy said you helped buy it." I swallowed hard. "Yes, I did." Ellie looked up at me. "Then why don't you live here?" I didn't have an answer that made sense for an 8-year-old. Later that night, I tried again to connect. I offered to help clean the garage, to do some yard work, to bake cookies with the kids. Rachel brushed me off each time. "It's fine, Mom. We've got it handled." That night, I overheard another conversation between her and Mike. "She's just trying to be needed," Mike muttered. "It's kind of sad." "She's been through a lot," Rachel replied, but there was no warmth in her voice. "But we're not running a retirement home." I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. My hands gripped the blanket like it was the only thing keeping me from floating away. I had made peace with being alone after my husband died. But this new version of alone was different. This was rejection. Cold and calculated. They didn't want to hurt me outright. They just wanted me to leave on my own. The next day, I packed early. My train back home wouldn't depart until evening, but I couldn't bear another full day in a house that no longer wanted me. Rachel didn't ask why I was leaving early. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. At the door, as I zipped up my coat, she finally said something. "Mom," she began, "I hope you understand. It's just things are different now." I turned to her. "Yes, they are." She hesitated. "It doesn't mean we don't love you." I gave her a long look. "Love without kindness feels a lot like convenience." She didn't reply. Outside, the wind bit at my face, but it was more honest than anything I'd felt inside that house. On the train ride home, I stared out the window, watching the world blur past. I thought about the family dinners I used to host, the scraped knees I used to bandage, the nights I rocked her to sleep when storms scared her. And now, here I was, stormless, homeless in a way I'd never imagined, and still expected to smile and say thank you. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, and I opened the Notes app. Not to write a grocery list, not to send a cheerful update, but to start making a plan. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I'd go quietly. But they forgot something. I'm not done yet. It had been 4 days since I returned home. The apartment was quiet, predictably so, but this time, I didn't mind it. I had spent years associating silence with loneliness. Now it felt more like space, like clarity. Then came the envelope. It was waiting for me when I got back from the store. A plain white one, no return address, tucked carefully beneath my welcome mat. My name was written across the front in Rachel's handwriting. Inside were documents, professionally prepared, polished. Attached with a sticky note in that same familiar script. "Just sign whenever you're ready, Mom. It'll make everything easier." I stared at the paper in my hands for a long time. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, the one my husband and I had bought together 30 years ago, and began to read. At first, it looked routine. Small updates, estate planning language, boilerplate terms about streamlining responsibilities, and reducing confusion in the event of health changes. But the further I read, the more my stomach sank. Buried inside was a power of attorney document. Permanent. Irrevocable. If signed, it would give Rachel full control over my finances, my property, my medical decisions, over me. I set the pages down slowly. So this was it. They didn't want to wait. Not for time, not for illness, not for death. They wanted control now. Polished, legal, unchallengeable. A clean takeover, masked as help. I looked around my apartment. The modest furniture, the quiet clock ticking above the stove, the photographs of a life well lived. I had worked for all of this. Every penny, every inch of peace. And they wanted to sign it out from under me. I opened my phone and called Charles, a friend of my late husband's and a trusted attorney I hadn't spoken to in years. He answered on the second ring. "Olivia?" he said, surprised. "It's been too long." "I need your help," I said simply. And I need everything to be documented. Every paper trail, every account touched, locked down. There was a pause, but not hesitation. Understood. And Charles, I added quietly, we're not just protecting assets. We're preparing for a fight. He didn't ask questions. I'll be at your place by 10 tomorrow. After we hung up, I opened a drawer and carefully slid the unsigned documents back into the envelope. I laid it on the counter like a poisoned apple, harmless in appearance, lethal in effect. Let them think I hadn't noticed. Let them believe I was still the mother who nodded and signed. That woman was gone. The next morning, Charles arrived with 2 assistants, a briefcase full of forms, and a look I hadn't seen in years. Quiet seriousness. I've already started freezing joint authorizations, he said as we sat down. Your accounts are being secured. From here on, no transaction happens without your explicit approval. And Olivia? He paused. This wasn't a mistake on their part. This was coordinated. If you had signed that paperwork, they'd already be liquidating your assets by now. I nodded slowly. Then let's move faster. He met my eyes. We should consider hiring an investigator. If Rachel or her husband have used your accounts, anything unauthorized, it'll surface. Do it, I said. Hire whoever you trust, and Charles. Yes? If there's even a trace of fraud, I want it recorded. Documented. Not just for court, I hesitated. For me, I want to see exactly what they tried to take. He nodded. Then we'll begin immediately. That evening, I stood by my window watching the streetlights come on. I thought of Rachel, of Mike, of the house I helped build, the mortgage I covered, the family holidays I paid for. I thought about the birthdays they forgot and the calls that grew shorter, less frequent, until silence took their place. They had been preparing for this. Carefully, quietly, while smiling. But they forgot something. I wasn't just someone's mother. I was someone who had built a life from nothing, who had climbed out of grief, who had learned how to survive storms that would have drowned them. And now I wasn't grieving anymore. I was awake, and I was done playing nice. It took less than 48 hours for the investigator to find the first red flag. I was sitting on the balcony with my tea when my phone rang. His voice was calm, but urgent. Mrs. Whitman, we've uncovered something. Your daughter has submitted a second mortgage application using the house you gifted them as collateral. She's already received pre-approval. The cup stopped midair. I'm sorry. She what? She filed last week. Through a private lender, claimed the property was hers free and clear, no mention of how it was transferred, no indication of any power of attorney concerns. They're leveraging it for a line of credit. I pressed my free hand to my chest. Not in shock, but in calculation. And the lender doesn't know the circumstances? No, ma'am. As far as they're concerned, it's a generous family handoff, and she's just a resourceful homeowner. I exhaled slowly. Let's keep it that way, for now. But flag every move. I want a full report. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went inside, retrieved the original house deed from my file cabinet, and placed it on the table beside my untouched tea. This house, my house, was not a gift anymore. Not after what they'd done. The next morning, Charles called. The reversal paperwork is almost finalized. By this time next week, the title will be back in your name. We've also traced over a dozen questionable transactions routed through Rachel's accounts. Payments for landscaping, appliance upgrades, even tuition reimbursements. From my retirement fund, I asked, though I already knew. Mostly. Also your savings. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. She was building a life on stolen bricks. Charles's voice was low, and she expected you to keep smiling while she did it. She miscalculated, I said. The documents were ready by Thursday. Everything. The reversal of the house deed, the financial lockouts, the rescinding of all previous powers of attorney, a protective clause added to my estate, ensuring they'd never again have unsupervised access to a single penny I earned. I sat in Charles's office, the pages stacked before me like armor. It's all here, he said, nodding to the notary. I held the pen, steady this time. And as I signed, I felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken betrayals lift. With each signature, I took back something they had slowly stripped away. Not just control, but dignity, autonomy, self-respect. When the last document was done, Charles slid it gently into the final folder. They can't touch anything now, Olivia. The accounts, the property, it's all legally sealed. I nodded once. And if they contest it? He met my gaze. We have everything. The evidence of financial abuse, unauthorized transactions, the power of attorney packet they tried to slip under your door. If they take this to court, it becomes public record. They won't walk away clean. I stood slowly, not weak, not fragile, just finished. As I left his office, I looked out at the city. Somewhere, Rachel and Mike were still on that cruise, still sipping cocktails in blissful ignorance, dreaming about second mortgages and renovation plans they would never get to finish. Let them enjoy the sunset. Because when they docked, the house would already be sold. They came back 4 days later. I knew the exact time their flight landed. I knew which rideshare company they used. I even knew the driver's name. I parked my car a block away, watching the scene unfold like a silent play. From across the street, I saw Rachel step out of the car first, her oversized sunglasses back in place, barking orders at Mike as he struggled with the luggage. She was already talking, already directing. We need to get that appraisal rescheduled. The lender said we're still on track for... She stopped. Her gaze had snapped toward the driveway. 2 unfamiliar cars were parked there. A large moving truck stood idling, the rear ramp down. A young couple stood on the front steps, laughing with a realtor, key in hand. Mike furrowed his brow. Rachel's mouth hung slightly open. I waited until she turned toward me. Then I crossed the street. Deliberate. Calm. Mike saw me first. Mom? Rachel's head whipped toward me. Confusion folding into suspicion, then hardening into something more brittle. What's going on? She demanded. Who are these people? They're the new owners, I said simply. The house has been sold. Rachel's laugh came sharp, incredulous. Sold? You can't sell our house. You gave it to us. We were in the middle of refinancing. You were in the middle of committing fraud, I replied, voice even. Mike's eyes darted between us. Mom, I don't understand. What's happening? I handed him the folder. Inside, the reversal documents, the sale records, the financial audit, and the full legal report. His hands shook as he opened it. Rachel snatched it halfway through his reading, flipping the pages with growing panic. She skimmed too fast to absorb, but it didn't matter. The headlines were enough. This is illegal, she snapped. You can't just take everything from us. I didn't take anything, I said. I'm simply reclaiming what you tried to steal. You don't understand, she hissed. We were managing things for your benefit. I met her eyes. That's not what the forged power of attorney says, or the second mortgage application, or the personal credit card payments from my retirement account. Mike's voice cracked. You used her retirement fund? She's exaggerating, Rachel said quickly. I used it for the house. It's all still in the family. It was never yours, I interrupted, and it never will be. Mike looked like a child again, lost, eyes darting. Mom, we didn't mean to hurt you. I raised my hand. You didn't mean to get caught, I corrected. Silence. Thick, heavy, undeniable. Rachel clutched the papers to her chest like she could will them away. You can't do this to us, she whispered. You'll end up alone. I smiled, small, quiet, sharp. Alone, I said, is better than being used. Then I reached into my bag and handed her one more folder. This, I said, is what awaits you if you decide to take legal action. Rachel yanked it from me, flipped it open, her lips moving silently as she read line after line of itemized fraud, elder abuse, financial coercion, every transfer, every unauthorized withdrawal, every lie. Mike leaned over her shoulder, reading. His face turned gray. Emily, he whispered, what did you do? She turned on him like a wounded animal. Don't you dare put this on me. You were fine with it when the money was flowing. But he didn't argue. He just stood there, holding the proof in shaking hands, watching everything crumble. I took one step back, breathing in the late afternoon air. You gambled with my trust, I said softly, and you lost. Rachel's voice cracked into something I almost didn't recognize. We're family. You don't just cut family off like this. I looked at them, really looked. For the first time, I saw them not as my daughter and son-in-law, but as people. People who had weighed love against convenience and chosen the latter. You didn't act like family, I replied. You acted like predators. Then I turned, and I didn't look back. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly for a while, letting the quiet fill the space that had once been occupied by worry. No music, no news, just the soft hum of the engine and the distant sound of wind rushing past. When I finally pulled into the parking lot of my apartment, the sun was dipping low behind the buildings. The modest complex was nothing like the house I'd once owned. No grand foyer, no designer fixtures. But as I turned the key and stepped inside, a deep calm settled over me. It was mine, every inch of it. No strings, no lies, no one waiting with another document to sign. I walked across the bare floor, opened the window, and stood there for a long moment. A breeze floated in, soft and cool. Somewhere down the street, children were laughing, chasing each other in a game I couldn't see. Behind me, the silence wasn't hollow. It was peace. I brewed a cup of tea and let it steep longer than usual. I wasn't in a hurry anymore. When I sat at the small kitchen table, the phone lit up beside me. A message from Mike. "Mom, please, can we talk? This isn't what I wanted. Please." I stared at the screen. There was no "I'm sorry," not really. Just panic. Regret without reflection. Another message followed. "Emily got carried away. You know how she is." I didn't want any of this. He was reaching, trying to rewrite history now that there was nothing left to gain. He didn't call me Mom when he handed me contracts and turned away. He didn't say please when they drained my savings or used my name to fund their future. Now he remembered. I didn't reply. Instead, I placed the phone face down and stood. The room was warm, golden with fading light. The walls were bare but honest. No pictures hung yet, no smiling portraits hiding knives behind the frames. Just truth. Just now. I moved through the apartment slowly, absorbing its smallness, its simplicity. It didn't feel like starting over. It felt like coming home. The next day, Charles called with the final confirmation. The sale had processed. The proceeds were secured in a new account, untouchable and protected. Everything they had tried to control was gone from their grasp. Rachel hadn't messaged me. Not once. Not to apologize. Not to fight. She had disappeared into whatever corner she crawled to lick her wounds and re-strategize. But there were no strategies left. I had burned the blueprint. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need them to hurt the way I had. I only needed them gone. Later that evening, I walked to the mailbox. Bills, flyers, and one small envelope. Inside, a card with no return address. It was from the young couple who bought the house. "Thank you," it read. "We love it already. We'll take good care of it." I held the card in my hand for a long while. Then, slowly, I smiled. They didn't know the history. They didn't know the lies and the heartache. All they knew was that someone gave them a home. And they were grateful. That was enough. That house would finally know honest joy again. Not entitlement. Not schemes. Just laughter and meals and morning light over clean countertops. I poured myself another cup of tea and curled up by the window. Let them rage. Let them blame each other. Let them file whatever grievances their pride couldn't swallow. They could scream into the void all they wanted. I wouldn't be there to hear it. Because I had finally stopped holding the door open for people who only came to take. The days that followed were quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels like waiting or mourning, but the kind that feels earned. A stillness that no longer trembles. I rose early. I cooked small meals. I folded my laundry while the sun spilled in through open blinds. It had been years since I felt this kind of peace. No one watching me. No one managing me. I walked to the market on Tuesdays. I joined a book club at the library. I started a journal, not to document pain, but to remind myself that I still existed beyond it. And in the evenings, I sat by the window sipping tea, watching life pass by, unhurried, untouched by the wreckage they left behind. The messages eventually stopped. Mike texted one more time. A string of words that meant nothing. Just noise. Half-hearted regret coded in excuses. I didn't reply. Rachel never messaged at all. I wasn't surprised. She was never one for confrontation, not unless she had the upper hand. And now she had nothing. No house. No access. No leverage. What she had underestimated, what they both failed to see, was that the real gift I had given them wasn't the house. It was my trust. And once that was gone, nothing else remained. Dalton called one afternoon to confirm that all accounts had been transferred, secured, and documented. The investigators' final report had been notarized, sealed, and archived. "They won't recover from this easily," he said. "But that's not your concern anymore." He was right. I had no interest in revenge. No appetite for their punishment. My victory wasn't in watching them fall. It was in walking away. A week later, a neighbor stopped me in the hallway. She was kind, maybe 10 years younger than me. She asked if I wanted to join the garden committee. "We're replanting the courtyard," she said with a warm smile. You seem like someone who knows how to grow things." I almost laughed. Grow things, what a phrase. They'd tried so hard to bury me, under guilt, under debt, under silence. But I had grown anyway. The committee met every Sunday morning. I started bringing muffins. No one knew who I used to be. No one knew the story I carried. They just knew me as Olivia, the quiet woman in Tusi with the good coffee and the calm eyes. I liked that. Let the past rot behind someone else's locked phone. Let their lies fester in inboxes and paper trails. I had no more to give it. One evening, I walked a little farther than usual, past the church, down a side street lined with jacaranda trees in full bloom, their purple petals scattered like confetti along the sidewalk. A boy rode past on a scooter, laughing. His mother called after him with gentle exasperation. I watched them until they disappeared around the corner. A version of me long ago would have felt a pinch in the chest watching that scene. A version of me might have asked, "Where did I go wrong?" But I didn't ask that anymore, because now I knew. I didn't go wrong. They did. I gave them everything: time, money, shelter, love, and they mistook it for weakness. They saw kindness as currency. They thought a mother's heart was something to leverage. But I had stopped bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand me a bandage. They would never see it that way. That was fine. Some truths are only for the survivors. Spring settled in gently. The windows stayed open longer now. The breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass, blooming jasmine, and the distant sound of wind chimes from a balcony above. I had begun to breathe differently. Not shallow, not braced, but deep. As though every cell in my body had finally exhaled after years of holding back. No one knew the woman I used to be in this new life, and I didn't offer that version of myself anymore. The Olivia who bent backward for family, who signed papers out of love, who stayed silent for peace. That woman had quietly packed her things and stepped out of the room the day I walked away from the house they tried to claim. Now it was just me. And for once, that was enough. The book club asked me to host. I set out cookies and mismatched teacups. We sat in my small living room and talked about stories, not mine, but others. Fictional stories, gentle ones. No one interrupted me. No one asked for money. No one handed me forms with fine print hiding knives. After the meeting, one of the women lingered. "You're very grounded," she said, smiling softly, like someone who's been through a storm but still stands. I returned the smile. "I used to think the storm was my fault," I said. "Now I know I just survived it." She nodded, not prying. That's the kind of grace I'd craved for years. Not people who needed something. Just people who listened and left space for silence. Later that night, I sat by the open window with a blanket draped over my knees and a notebook in my lap. No screens, no news. Just the sound of wind and my own pen moving across the page. I didn't write about them anymore. Not Mike, not Rachel. They didn't deserve more chapters. I wrote about tomatoes in the community garden, the way their vines curled hopefully around the trellis. I wrote about the boy downstairs who always waved when I walked past. I wrote about the sound of my own laughter, rediscovered in small conversations and bad jokes over breakfast. And when I closed the notebook, I felt something I hadn't in years. Safe, whole, quiet, but not small. I never replied to Mike's last text. He had nothing left to say that I needed to hear. I knew what he wanted, to rewrite the ending. To smooth over the cracks with just enough regret to look like love. But regret is not redemption. Not when it arrives after the house has sold and the bank accounts are empty. Rachel didn't reach out again. That at least was honest. Some endings are blunt, some people don't circle back, and some betrayals cut so clean there's no scar, only absence. I learned not to look for apologies in people who couldn't recognize their cruelty unless it cost them comfort. And more than that, I learned I didn't need one. Not anymore. My worth was never dependent on their recognition. I had spent too many years pouring into a well that only echoed back emptiness. But I had stopped that now. I had filled my own cup. And in doing so, I discovered something they never understood. You don't need to be loved by the wrong people. You only need to be at peace with yourself. Sometimes survival isn't loud. It's not slamming doors or screaming matches. Sometimes survival is walking out quietly, locking the door behind you, and planting flowers where they once sowed fear. And sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do after being erased is exist fully again. On my way to the garden that Saturday, I passed a yard sale. A child sat cross-legged on the grass beside a table of paperbacks and toys. "Want a book?" she asked brightly. I smiled and picked one. A battered old copy of The Secret Garden. 50 cents, she said. I gave her $1. Keep the change. Back home, I placed the book on the shelf above my desk. The same shelf that had once been empty, that had once held only grief. Now it held beginnings, and not a single photograph of the people who once called themselves family, because this story wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine, from the first page to the last.